mountain gorillas awake a sense of optimism. They are the only great apes in the world known to be increasing in number.
Reaching the milestone of 1,000 gorillas has been remarkable, so it's extremely good news.
But what happens when the mountain gorilla population grows? However, its habitat does not. What if it becomes too small? Gorilla groups fight each other much more often today than in the past. And because of these attacks, gorillas regularly die.
This is something common, intra-group fights and the resulting wounds.
We wanted to know if the stress levels are increasing.
If we don't act now, we are at risk of not being able to do it in 10 years, for example, from now.
How do conservationists deal with these latest challenges? And what questions are scientists confronted with? How many gorillas do we want to reach? 1,000, 1,500, 2,000?
Is it still a wild population, or when does it become a wild zoo?
The last remaining mountain gorillas on Earth live in only 2 small areas in eastern Africa. One is on the slopes of the Virunga Volcanoes in the border region between Rwanda, Uganda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The other is only about 30 kilometers north, the Bwindi Forest in Uganda. The Bwindi Impenetrable Forest is a primeval plain and mountain rainforest. 331 square kilometers, known for its exceptional biodiversity, are home to over 400 of the world's last mountain gorillas. Difficult terrain to determine their exact numbers.
There's also a reason it's called Impenetrable National Park. The vegetation is very dense. You could have a gorilla not very far away from here and not know it because of all the vegetation.
Martha Robbins from the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig is on her way back to the Muchiza group. Each gorilla clan bears the name of its leader, a silverback. After an hour-and-a-half walk, she reaches the group that she is observing today.
Right now, we found them about 8:30 in the morning, and they were up feeding in fruit trees. They were eating one of the most common fruits that they eat here. We wear surgical masks when we're with them, the gorillas. If we're within 10 meters of them, we wear them. Because even though right now I feel very healthy, I'm not exhibiting any signs of having a cold, I may still be carrying it. And the last thing I want to do is get these gorillas sick. Got my mouth covered, got my nose covered.
Other national parks hesitate to make face masks compulsory. The biologist always has them with her when she visits the animals.
So there's several right here. If we just wait, they're going to cross right across here. This is very rare. That adult female was Mujeni. She has the youngest baby, who is about 9 months old now. But interestingly, she was also carrying a second infant, which is not hers. A second infant. Get this, the silverback's going to come across. There are 13 gorillas in this group. The silverback is about 20 years old. He has been habituated from birth. I've actually watched him grow up, which is pretty cool.
The Muchiza group is habituated, meaning the gorillas are accustomed to the presence of humans. The behavioral scientist observes what the animals eat, how they interact, and how the individual animals differ. She studies every detail of their living environment, always from a certain distance.
With these habituated gorillas, it's amazing because they kind of let us into their world so we can observe their day-to-day activities. It's always very thrilling to see the new babies and to see them grow. This one's reached the age where he's starting to explore everything, and it's really quite fun to watch. In the broader view, though, it's very exciting and good to know that every new baby represents a healthy population and represents that the population is growing.
Mountain gorillas are the only great apes in the world that are increasing in population. An unprecedented success. Since the end of 2018, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature has classified them only as endangered, and for the first time, they are no longer considered critically endangered. Martha Robbins has witnessed the population's recovery during her research.
He was born in 1999, and I go out there now and I see him leading a group with 5 adult females. He's got his own kids climbing all over him. I feel so privileged that I've been able to watch this same gorilla over 20 years. In terms of gaining human attention, the fact that the gorillas are very attractive, I will use the word cute, is definitely works in their favor. And I mean, as a scientist, a lot of it turns into numbers and data, and it could be any species out there. Yeah, I still have to have my scientist hat on, but who can not really enjoy watching these little babies play?
And yet it is the numbers that provide information about the future of the entire species. Every 5 years, scientists count the gorillas thoroughly. This is a waiting game, because not all of the Bwindi gorilla groups are in the researchers' constant focus.
With this group that's habituated, it's very easy to know. We just saw Muchiza, Twijiche, Nyakabara, Kagote, Garodi. That's very easy. But there are many gorillas in this park that are not habituated, and they are the ones that are more challenging to count.
To ensure that they count every single animal, the researchers comb the rainforest closely for a census and walk thousands of kilometers on foot.
During the censuses, we will have 6 teams of 5 people working over a period of about 3 months. I have been involved in 5 mountain gorilla censuses, and it is by far the most difficult work I have done here.
We sweep from east to west. So, for example, this map, if we want to start a census, so like, for example, 2 teams are on this side, then 2 teams are in the middle, and another 2 teams are in the southern part of the park. Like if you are sweeping a house, you sweep from one corner to the other side.
Together, employees from Rwanda, Uganda, and the Congo trawl through the jungle, twice in a row in order to minimize the error rate. This is only possible because the animals live in a closed and limited area. It is a unique process, but also exhausting.
The main thing we're looking for is fresh gorilla trail. So when the gorillas walk through the forest, they're big animals. So they bash down vegetation, which there's a lot of here. And the trackers, experienced people were able to see, oh, this is a gorilla trail. And if we find that, it's great, because then we will track to the nest sites and be able to count the nests and collect feces. Gorillas make nests every night, so they just bend down vegetation and sit in it and fall asleep. And if you have 10 gorillas in a group, maybe you'll find 8 nests. And maybe 2 of those nests have big adult-sized feces in it, and then small baby-sized feces. And so that's how we can ascertain that there are probably 10 gorillas in that group. But to ensure that that number is accurate, and it's not a case where one gorilla made a nest and actually didn't like who they were sleeping next to, so they went and made a nest someplace else, and we double count that gorilla. We also do genetic analysis with the feces.
With the help of the feces, the scientists can calculate the census result even more precisely.
This is feces from the silverback Muchiza. I saw him defecate while he was sitting here. And it's not very nice, But actually, I'm excited. It's great stuff. Well, they're vegetarian, so it's not that bad. But this is actually very valuable in that we can use it to extract DNA. So we only need about a teaspoon worth, so not very much. And yeah, this is quite soft. We know that this is an endangered population. And the way I look at it is, imagine you're a businessman and imagine you make toothpaste. So again, something very basic. You would want to track how much toothpaste you're making, how much you're selling, and what to do if you're not selling any. So it's kind of the same with conserving endangered species, where we need to know how many there are and whether it's increasing or decreasing, because that gives us some indication as to whether the conservation strategies are working or not, or whether we should try something different.
Only 30 kilometers south in the Virunga Volcanoes, the existing protection strategies for mountain gorillas have already worked successfully. Within sight, the chain of the over 3,000-meter high volcanoes. Here in the border region, between Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda, the number of mountain gorillas has doubled in the last 3 decades. 604 animals were counted in the latest census. The Rwandan government has banned poaching and logging in the national park and introduced a controlled tourism concept. The revenue is partly used for nature conservation, and 10% is for the construction of schools, roads, and hospitals in the region. In Rwanda, an average of 500 to 700 people live in 1 square kilometre, 3 to 4 times as many as in Germany or France. Musanze is the gateway to the national park. About 100,000 people live in this flourishing town, which benefits from tourism. It is one example of Rwanda's rapid development since the 1994 genocide. Winnie Eckhart from Leipzig has been working here for 15 years at the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund Research Center. She continues the work of the famous gorilla expert who came to Rwanda in 1967.
This desk was in Dian Fossey's house and had been secured before the unrest in Rwanda began. Practically every evening she would sit here at her desk with her typewriter and record all the details she observed in the groups she visited during the day.
With her observations in the forest, the American researcher had started a unique data collection. Plus, the mountain gorillas were not only the subject of her scientific work, they became a part of her life.
Even today, it's still exciting to find names of gorillas that we have observed from the time they were really young and how they grew up. It is really impressive how detailed her observations were.
In the 1970s, Dian Fossey counted only 254 mountain gorillas. This motivated her fanatical fight against poachers and the deforestation of their mountain rainforest. But her commitment upset the locals and she made many enemies.
At the time when Dian Fossey was still alive and protecting the gorillas, she did not believe that the gorillas would survive until the year 2000. She assumed that they would become extinct by the year 2000.
Dian Fossey died before the turnaround. In 1985, she was murdered, probably by poachers. But through Fossey's efforts, the world learned about the fate of the great apes. Protective measures began to pay off. The mountain gorillas' numbers finally began to rise again, with dire consequences.
What we see here is their habitat. Here we have the Bisoke, the Karisimbi volcano, and this is approximately where Dian Fossey set up her tent.
When Winnie Eckard began her research in Rwanda in 2004, there were 3 groups of gorillas. Each point that you see moving here represents the movement patterns of the groups.
Over a period of 15 years, these groups have grown tremendously, up to 65 gorillas in the Pablo group, which is an absolute world record. In 2004, I was not aware that there could be more than one silverback in a group. That's when you learn very quickly. What happened in 2007 simply surprised us all.
After a long period of stability, the chaos began.
As you can imagine, 65 gorillas in one group, that can't go well for long. We were waiting for the moment this had to happen. The groups partly split up. Males started to form their own group with some females. Pablo, for example, split into several groups, and where we had 3 groups before, we had 12 groups at times. You have to imagine, the size of the area remains the same, but with 3 times as many groups, there is less habitat for each group. The groups meet much more often. Interactions can be incredibly stressful. It can be a fight to the death for the males, and there is also a lot at stake for the young animals.
That's why Winnie Eckart and her team of researchers travel to the national park several times a week. She wants to know how the gorillas react to the increasing confinement. The national park is a small green island in the middle of a region that is extensively cultivated. Crop fields reach right up to the park border. The primates cannot simply migrate when they feel constricted.
I feel at home up here. It's always one of the highlights of my week when I get to go into the forest. It's basically like relatives up there that you visit sometimes. Say hello and see how they're doing.
Winnie Eckart wants to explore the social dynamics between primates. She is on her way to the gorilla group called Pablo. The group, which has experienced great upheavals in the past, now numbers 24 animals. At the border of the national park, the scientist meets park rangers, who usually know exactly where the individual groups are at any given time. The team announces its visit in the language of the gorillas.
Okay. This sound is called the Belch vowel. We use it when we arrive at the group and slowly approach them. It works like a greeting. We're here now, we're coming, it's all good. You can see the size of the vegetation, so the Belch vowel is very important, so they can hear us.
Okay.
There's our very special friend. Unfortunately, a bit too curious sometimes. Maybe just put the camera down a bit. Put it down a bit.
Winnie Eckart doesn't want to cause additional stress. In the Pablo group, a maturing male gorilla indicates that he wants to form his own group. This leads to tension.
Here we see one of the blackbacks. We also fondly call them teenagers, male teenagers. He recently got a real beating from his older comrades, Obuso and Duchishosa. He followed one of the young females and perhaps wanted to separate and maybe even mate, and that led to fights. It did not work as he wanted. He has some wounds, you can't see them so well now, but that happens from time to time. Sometimes there are disputes.
Today, the Pablo group is peaceful. 3 gorilla babies are enjoying the morning sun. They are completely dependent on their mothers for the first few years and are breastfed until they are about 3.5 years old. At 9 months, they start nibbling on the first plants and gradually learn to stand on their own feet in the jungle classroom.
Up there you can see the little one. That's Umuyango. He loves to play. Sometimes he plays alone, like right now. He probably hasn't found a playmate at the moment. But it won't be long until another baby comes around. That's a welcome invitation.
At that age, fights between the young apes are playful. However, if a growing gorilla wants to challenge the dominant silverback, or if an outside gorilla tries to entice females from the group, it can suddenly become very aggressive. Since the density has increased so massively recently, such fights have become more frequent.
We had about 1 interaction per month in 2007. Now we sometimes see up to 3 interactions a day between different groups. So the interaction rate is now extremely high.
Babies are in the greatest danger during such fights. As long as a gorilla mother is still nursing, she is not ready to mate again. If a gorilla succeeds in enticing away females, it almost always kills their offspring, because it is not his own. Scientists call this behavior infanticide.
When you witness something like this, it is, of course, one of the things that's very hard to watch and process. Of course you want to do something about it, but you know that it's natural behavior that you have to tolerate. It is important to be tough and try not to let anything get too close, but it is, of course, very difficult. You get to know the young ones from day one, their mothers too, and you can see that they suffer a lot, and the whole group is exposed to stress. It's hard to accept, but that's how it is.
Tens of thousands of them in the wild, so the status of a species doesn't depend as much on...
The researchers' observations in the forest lead to surprising scientific results. 15,000 kilometers away in California. At UC Davis University, where Dian Fossey once studied for 2 semesters, French gorilla researcher Dian Fossey discusses the latest developments.
Do they get depressed? Do they get depressed? Yeah, so they do. Yeah, they get sad. They have, gorillas are, like most mammals actually, they have feelings. A female gorilla who loses her offspring will be sad for a period of time, but eventually she'll get over it and she will get pregnant again and hopefully forget a little bit about the tragedy that happened. But I do remember distinctly observing female gorilla, I remember in particular, who had just lost her offspring, and she looked sad and she was always sort of on the edge of the group. Not very active, not playful, for a few months after the death of her offspring. Yeah.
Dian Fossey's focus is on long-term data. He looks at patterns and developments over years and decades, using quantitative methods, and visits the gorilla's home countries regularly. He benefits from the long-term records of the field researchers in Rwanda. 50 years of observations, started by Dian Fossey, have resulted in a mega database that now enables new insights. One can clearly see that there were almost no cases of infanticide in Rwanda between 1980 and 2000. After that, the number of infanticide cases has increased dramatically, as these little red stars here show. Over the last 10 years, the mortality rate of baby gorillas due to infanticide has increased 5-fold. In addition, the mortality rate of male gorillas has also risen as a result of wounds they received during the encounters. Fossey's analysis allow forecasts for the gorilla's future. Is the gorilla population's enormous growth endangering the animal's healthy development? We have a level of violence that is no longer natural or ordinary for mountain gorillas, and as a result, the population is now growing at a slower rate. If the aggression continues at this level, the population could actually shrink.
Décroître en taille si ce niveau d'agression continue à se maintenir.
Not only does the population regulate itself, the animal's stress levels also increases. It affects their well-being. We should look into this problem and solve it. Damien Kayo's colleague, Vinnie Eckart from the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund in Rwanda, is on the trail of precisely this stress problem.
Firstly, we wanted to know how stressful such an interaction can be within a group. It can also be very peaceful, especially groups that have only recently separated and then see each other again after 1, 2 or 3 months. They sometimes play or encounter very peacefully, but it can also be very, very aggressive.
From observation alone, scientists cannot conclude what stress physiology such situations can alter in the individual gorillas. This is why Vinnie Eckart, too, is interested in the animal's feces.
Here we have a fecal sample from a female that just walked by. You don't need that much. I use the glove as a means of transport and fold it over. Just like that. That's it. It's easy. Just tie the knots. And then it's very important to write down what time it is. It's 11:21 a.m. The fecal sample is from Moketchedu. That's her code. And so that our people in the lab know whose sample it is, I fold it up, very small, put it up here, tie it up again, and then it can go to Musanze.
We take the sample and we try to remove the fiber. It's not easy to remove all fiber, but we try our best.
We affectionately call this our poop lab. What Rose and Martin are doing right now is extracting hormones from the fecal samples we collected in the forest.
Similar to the human body, stress triggers a hormonal chain reaction in a gorilla.
When a gorilla is exposed to a stress factor, there is a very, very long stress cascade, and the end products of this stress reaction are then incorporated into the feces via the intestines and then excreted. This is our chance to find out how stressed they are without having to take a blood sample.
Together with local experts who were specially trained, almost 16,000 samples have been collected and evaluated since 2011. And it is not only about the evidence of stress, but also about its intensity.
We can observe certain types of behavior, like scratching the head or earlobes or yawning. Gorillas do the same, but that doesn't tell us anything about how much stress the gorillas are now under.
The laboratory analysis provides researchers with unambiguous information. Numbers, facts. There is truth in feces, and that truth can be discovered.
Of course, it is an advantage to be able to quantify stress precisely. You have a completely different tool. You can communicate much better. Everyone understands numbers. Here's an example of a very, very aggressive interaction that suddenly took the group by surprise. A silverback appeared out of nowhere and ran into the group. And what you can see very clearly is that the two youngest animals were most exposed to stress because they are also at the greatest risk of falling victim to infanticide. What you can also see very clearly is that after 5 days, the stress goes down again. Basically, reactions to an acute stress factor are life-sustaining and very important for humans as well as for gorillas. If one is ready to fight, one can react appropriately to danger. However, this becomes problematic if a stress factor lasts longer or occurs very frequently and regularly.
Therefore, in a second study, Vinny investigated which living conditions cause permanent stress and came across two measurable triggers.
There are things that we have to keep a close eye on because we have ascertained changes in baseline levels. For example, in months when temperatures have risen very high and also months with extreme rainfall. This indicates that climate change is a challenge.
The effects of climate change are also being felt in Rwanda. Dry seasons are becoming longer and rain often falls more heavily and with greater concentration than before. Experts predict a rise in temperature of up to 3 degrees by 2050.
I had guessed that especially cold days are more likely to cause stress, because you can really see that the gorillas cuddle up together and it seems a bit uncomfortable. But it was very surprising that specifically the hot months are more difficult for the gorillas, which might have something to do with the fact that gorillas have black fur, which absorbs sun and can lead to heat stress. But it's also possible that they are easily dehydrated, and the body has to work hard to compensate.
Besides climate changes in the region, a second factor has measurably increased the stress baseline levels.
We also found that groups which only have very small areas exclusively to themselves, and sometimes have none at all, show increased baseline stress levels, simply because they overlap so much with other groups. It may be related to the fact that they have shared food resources, or that they can run into another group at any time, and that this already leads to an increase in the baselines.
Vinnie Eckard's research results are alarming, like an early warning system. Those who have to deal with the acute consequences of stress almost daily are the gorilla doctors. The vets are on duty when mountain gorillas fall ill or are wounded. Dr. Gaspard Nzaizenga is one of them.
Then we found the group quite relatively early. They were resting. There seemed to be tension between the dominant silverback and his subordinate silverback. A few minutes later, the aggression became into a really serious fight between the two. We witnessed that fight. It resulted into an injury, which was not a really serious wound, but it was a wound which was still fresh and bleeding. The second lacking silverback got a fresh wound on the right eyebrow.
It's not just in emergencies that they move out. The gorilla doctors are also on preventive missions. In any wind and weather, and no matter how long or difficult the ascent is. Today, the team will climb up the slopes of Karisimbi volcano. It is the highest of the 8 volcanoes and rises to over 4,500 meters.
We are constantly monitoring the health of this population, and with the help of our field team of trackers who also report every day on the health status of the group members. Sometimes it takes so many hours of hiking because we know where they left them yesterday and they try to estimate the distance. But from the morning they start also moving.
And then suddenly, a thunderstorm swallows them in the rainforest.
Yeah. I'm trying to get the signal.
The vet had planned a home visit to the Sousa group. Already 2.5 hours into the forest, he loses the radio signal of the park rangers who located the group.
Strato! I think he's trying to find a way by himself. Strato! Strato was trying to find the trails where they're heading. I'm trying to call him, but let me see where he reaches them.
After another hour of walking in pouring rain, the vet hears familiar sounds.
What you could hear was a silverback screaming and was displaying, chest beating. We can't really tell by now if he was a power display between the group members or if he just was displaying power for us to welcome us in the group. So we will be starting our observation in a few minutes to come.
Finally, he finds the group. The park rangers had already informed him about fights and the wounds of 2 silverbacks had inflicted. The doctor wants to see it for himself.
Yeah, this is Kuramba, the second ranking silverback in the Sosa group. He's the one that just of recent has started challenging the dominant silverback Kurira. You see he had sustained a wound which is healing in the back. They are on a good road to recovery. They show good healing signs. And when it proves to be a life-threatening condition, then we have to intervene and provide medication.
Gaspar Zeitzenger must be careful that nobody from his team gets caught between the sides in this tense stress situation. The challenging silverback has already been able to pull 3 females and 2 adolescent animals onto his side and has recently started to keep his distance from the clan leader. The group could soon break apart.
The silverback attacks, and sometimes when they are brave enough, they can manage to grab one of you, which is what we always try to avoid. We need to have a team of brave guys who can stand their ground and don't run away. You understand the fight results into injuries, but also these encounters can provide opportunities for pathogen transmission between groups. We might be having a pathogen in one group, but then these interactions can result into a pathogen being shared to the other group as well. It's still a fragile population. That's why we have to keep a close eye on this population, monitor them closely. Just a single outbreak can wipe out the population.
Such viruses can also be introduced into the park by visitors. Human DNA is 98.4% identical to that of mountain gorillas, a dangerous affinity.
There was an outbreak in 2009 which killed 2 gorillas, and we managed to find out that the virus that was responsible for that outbreak was actually the human metapneumovirus, which is a human virus.
Does man, who wants to protect the gorillas, thus become a danger to them? Almost 100 tourists a day are allowed to visit the mountain gorillas in the national park in Rwanda, and they are willing to pay a small fortune for 1 hour with the animals. A ticket costs $1,500. Tourism brings 17 to 18 million US dollars into the national treasury every year. Part of it flows back into the park's conservation and thus directly benefits the gorillas.
The celebration comes with a challenge. So we have about 20 groups of gorillas, of mountain gorillas. And what does that mean? With a habitat of 160 square kilometers. That is very small.
Together with the park director, the state head of wildlife conservation is looking for solutions to mediate between species protection, tourism, and the growing concerns of the local people.
This is the older buffer wall that tries to deter wildlife from coming from the park. We've seen buffaloes coming out, we've seen gorillas coming out. Not our wish, of course, but it happens as we try to better every day the protection of the wildlife, but also protecting our people.
The animals live right next door to the people. Fields with potatoes and beans, as well as eucalyptus plantations, reach up to the park border. And mountain gorillas love eucalyptus. Since the animals are accustomed to the presence of humans, they do not feel disturbed. Francois Ndugutse was once a poacher in the park. Today he earns his money as a farmer. He cultivates 7 hectares of land. These fields are my property, from here where we stand up to the border of the national park. Look at that tree. If a gorilla comes and tears off the bark all around it, only the inside remains. But it's the bark that carries the sap from bottom to top. When the bark is gone, the tree dries and dies. Then we have to cut it down. Not only mountain gorillas, but also buffalo and forest elephants frequently leave the park and destroy harvests. In such cases, Francois Ndugutse can apply to the government for compensation, but it only partially makes up for his losses. They forage the fields. Sometimes they can destroy up to 2,000 square meters of land that could yield me 5 tons of potatoes. Instead of earning 1.2 million Rwandan francs, I get 120 to 150,000 in compensation. Even if the people who live around the national park are financially supported by the government and various organizations, a loss of 90% remains. We farmers have often said that the government should put up a fence around the national park. That would end the conflict between animals and humans. The conflict has been going on for decades. After the national park was founded in 1925, huge areas were cleared for settlements and agriculture. The park has shrunk by 54% overall, and with it, the number of mountain gorillas. Now that their population has recovered, the government is striving for a different strategy.
Because the park is small and the gorilla population is growing, we want to expand it. And expanding it means from this wall you're seeing and downward about 3 kilometers.
Rwanda has already drawn up plans. The park is to be expanded by 3,740 hectares, plus an additional buffer zone of another 6,000 hectares.
The buffer zone is a breathing space where management remains under government and the management of a national park. But within this buffer zone, we're going to probably plant bamboo or tea, coffee, economic activity, that does not hinder the activities of conservation, but at the same time aims to benefit the locals.
The government plans to resettle 3,600 households with 18,000 people for the park expansion. In return, it promises them new, modern villages with electricity and drinking water.
We're going to have all infrastructure that is needed, especially focusing on health and education, which is key. But also envision that when this project starts, about 7,500 people will be employed.
That's all still up in the air. Jeanne d'Arc Mukushimana is worried already. On her small piece of land, she grows vegetables to feed herself and her 5 children. In addition, she works as a day labourer. In a good month, she has around $25 in her household budget. Like many others, she worries about not being adequately compensated.
I got the land from my in-laws to build a house here. My life is about to take a turn for the worse. Apparently the gorillas are more important than we are. If that's the government's decision, they'll throw us out, so the gorillas have more room.
The growth of the mountain gorilla population thus also raises fundamental ethical questions. Human interests are opposed to the interests of wildlife protection. This is a conflict that also concerns scientist Martha Robbins in Uganda. Back in the Bwindi Forest, at the gorilla project of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology.
This is the gorilla house. This house has been here for about 10 years now. It's a bit of a sanctuary. We're right on the edge of the national park, which is beautiful. Yeah, the yard, monkeys will come by.
3 times a year, Martha Robbins lives and works in Bwindi for about 1 month.
This is what I call the gorilla wall. It's vaguely an art meets science project. So this is something I just kind of started for fun to mark the development of individual gorillas. So each column is a different individual gorilla. These 2 infants were born about 2 years ago, this one about 1.5 years ago. There's one baby that was born about 8 months ago. I have photos, I just need to shift everybody again.
With the Bwindi gorillas, 5 years pass before a female has a new baby again. The biologist has found out that in the Virunga region, only 4 years lie between births. This means that the population in Bwindi is not growing quite as fast. But overall, the trend is positive.
They represent more than the numbers. I mean, we know the population has increased, but at the same time, it's made up of individuals. We have only about 1,000. If you go to a multiplex cinema on a Friday night, there are probably more than 1,000 people in there watching movies. That's how many mountain gorillas we have. It's not very many. So on the one hand, we still run the risk that they could go extinct. But on the other hand, we need to shift and start thinking differently about some management strategies.
We have put it 6. Okay. So 8
The Max Planck Institute in Leipzig. 90% of the mountain gorillas from Rwanda, Uganda, and the Congo are registered in the genetics laboratory of the Institute of Anthropology. This is a result of the extensive census work.
Obviously, this is quite different from the field where we collect the samples, but this is such a crucial part of the process as well, where we extract DNA from the feces and we're able to get these unique genotypes. It's remarkable. I mean, it's sort of this detective thing, and we're able to develop a whole nother picture of the 2 mountain gorilla populations in this very small lab space.
And this picture confirms their growth. The most recent census in the Bwindi Forest counted 459 mountain gorillas. Together with the animals in the Virunga area, that makes 1,063. Again, more.
I think the success is a success, but the question is it too much of a good thing?
It is very likely that the stress level and death rate of the gorilla population will increase. More animals will have health problems or die than it has been the case so far. And you can ask yourself, will local authorities and international organizations allow this and accept the fate of this population? Or will they be tempted to intervene? Even ecotourism can put a certain pressure on the government to intervene. Tourists certainly do not want to see sick, stressed animals.
Lui-même constitue une certaine pression auprès du gouvernement pour intervenir. On imagine que les touristes n'ont pas envie de voir des individus qui sont stressés, qui sont pas en bonne santé, etc.
We have more people in the national park protecting gorillas than gorillas themselves. More researchers, conservationists and tourists than anywhere else in the world. Today the gorillas depend on humans and humans depend on the gorillas. We no longer really have a species that lives wild, pristine and independent from human activities.
How much intervention do we want to do when we're monitoring them? If the management goes very, very far in terms of what kind of medical care these gorillas are getting, are we supplementing their diet? And we are so far away from that now. But is it still a wild population, or when does it become a wild zoo? This is a conversation that needs all the people involved in gorilla conservation, and that conversation needs to start now.